I'm going to do stake rankings with James Mirtle. I got a ton of questions for him in terms of how this series is going to go. And, God, what ended up happening down the stretch there, because I'm still trying to reconcile it. That actually has, if that has any meaning to the Toronto Maple Leafs. James Mirtle, Senior Managing Editor of The Athletic. Good morning, sir. How are we?
I'm good. That was quite a soliloquy there to start us off.
Yeah, sorry, I went a little long. It's just, it's a long season, right?
I thought you were going to do every player on the roster. I was like,
no,
okay.
But it was more so that it's like, listen, first of all, trying to get you ready in the green room, right? Or I ran the light. I'm sorry. But it's true. It's like we get through this entire regular season. There's all these stories and there's all these things. And you try to take the pieces from the regular season that you think matter going into the postseason, right? And so I guess let's start with that. What do you think that we saw this year that is going to materialize or matter the most when it comes to the postseason?
I think this is a hard one to predict, but I think that the one thing you can point to with this team potentially over last year is they came into the year wanting to build a more playoff battle ready lineup. That was the point of everything. And I guess the other point was maybe a little bit more secondary scoring.
Yep.
You know, the book on this team was they're not going to be as good defensively. It definitely played out that way this year. They should be better offensively. I think they were maybe a little bit better offensively than last year. Certainly over the second half, you know, they were number one, number two in goals per game for the last 3-4 months of the season. So I would say that played out. And then you can see, you know, the toughness throughout the lineup. And, you know, in fairness, they tried to bring that in last year at the deadline. Like they brought in McCabe and O'Reilly and Shen and like there were Achari. There were pieces that came in that brought that element. But this year they tried to have it throughout the season. They tried to have it higher in the lineup, in some cases, Bertuzzi, Domi. And they need to hope that identity shift is what makes a difference, I think. Because if you look on paper, I'm not so sure, like this team didn't come in and blow last year. They finished, 9 points behind where they were last year, lower in the standings. Goals against was way up. Special teams don't look as good. But you're hoping that the intangibles, the physical play, the being able to step up when the games get tight, you're hoping that that's the difference between this team and last year.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on both accounts. Like those are the things that I do feel like I learned. This team is more willing to engage in the physical stuff. I do think that they're a tougher team. I don't think that they are going to wilt in the same ways that they have in the past. And I think that some of that has been a little overstated, but you know, ultimately the best players are going to set the tenor for that. But no, the up and down the lineup, there's more size. They're a bigger, stronger team than they have been in iterations past. And I do think that there is something to, you know, it being there at the very beginning and not a deadline transplant, even though last year's deadline transplant, I think, really worked. And that was a very, very good team. I'm totally with you on that. The bigger thing to me, though, is what you mentioned after, which is the secondary scoring. Is the part that matters most to me that we saw is I believe that a guy like Domi, a guy like Bertuzzi, a guy like McMahon, a guy like Yarncroc, like you go down the lineup, Nyes, whatever, there are just more players that can have a meaningful impact in this series offensively, put one by the Boston Bruins, and take some of that pressure off the Stars than any year prior. Like this is the first time where I haven't felt like, man, if it's not Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander, they're dead. You know, they're never going to have a game. I could absolutely see a game where those guys, you know, the core four end up with a couple assists, and then the Leafs win 3-2 on the backs of a bunch of those other guys who scored the 3 goals in this hockey game, right? And I'm curious to see how that impacts this hockey team mentally when Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander don't feel as though they need to just be carrying the entire scoring load where it has to be like, you know, 80% of the playoff scoring.
Well, I think that's what's bumped them up over the last, what would you say, 2.5 or 3 months, from being a good offensive team to being one of the best 2 or 3 offensive teams in the NHL. Like, it's not like the power play's on fire right now. Oof. The Stars were already scoring a ton in the first half. Like, Matthews and Nylander were on that crazy pace. You know, it was really the depth players start putting the puck in the net. You know, like, look at how many games there were over the last 30-35 where it was you got a goal from a Holmberg or a McMahon or someone down the lineup did something, and Domi and Bertuzzi came alive and were more kind of what we thought they would be coming into the season. And yeah, I mean, it's not like, you know, it sounds weird to say that that has to be such a factor given the star power they have at the top of the lineup. But how many times have we seen those players getting really stymied and really shut down, and there's just nothing else down the lineup? Like think of all the postseasons where it was Kerfoot and Engvall and Mikheyev and, who am I forgetting? Like, the players who just really couldn't make an impact offensively at all, who were on the third and fourth line. And those lines were just going out there, and you were just waiting for them to get off so that something might happen in the game.
Yeah, I would call them the punt lines. It felt like punt line, punt line. And I really do feel as though that exacerbated the struggles for the Leafs, like the gripping the sticks too tight, right? Like, this is what I think is bothering people, or at least what bothered me. I should stop saying people. I'll just say me. This is what made me a little traumatized over this Matthews stretch, is it felt like, Matthews, it's got to be Matthews, And what did that remind me of? Playoffs, right? Where it's like, Matthews, we need Matthews, and then it doesn't end up happening. And you go, that is the exact same feeling that you had in the postseasons past. This is exactly how it felt against Montreal. This is exactly how it felt against Columbus in the fake playoff series. This is exactly how it felt last year at times against Florida, where if you weren't getting a goal from Auston Matthews, you weren't getting it from anywhere else in the lineup. And then all of a sudden the game ends and he's got a ton of shots and he has a bunch of opportunities and a lot of, it was so close, but not quite. And you end up losing the hockey game. And this year, now that they're going to move out of that, right? This last final 4 games, and this is why, maybe I'll get into the psychology of that in a second in terms of whether you think it has an impact on the team. That is the part that I think is going to matter for them, is if they can come out here against Boston in game 1 or game 2, right? Split this series, but have it be during a game where a couple of the secondary guys score one and then the other guys start to flow. I really, that's when I'm going to say, look out for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They might be doing something this year.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point off the top. The Bruins aren't this juggernaut President's Trophy winning team. They were 7 points ahead of them in the standings this year. They're not as deep down the lineup. They're definitely not that deep at center. I look at their blue line. McAvoy's obviously a star. Lindholm's been really good since they brought him in. But after that, you can do some damage against that Boston blue line. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into this more, but there's one very obvious difference between these teams, and I don't think it's not in offensive firepower, and it's not on the blue line. The biggest difference is the 2 goaltenders that Boston has. But other than that, this is going to be a very, very even series, and there's going to be an opportunity for depth players to take advantage of, some of the players that Boston rolls out down the lineup.
Well, I was going to ask you, that was actually my follow-up, was like, where do you think that the biggest discrepancy is? And I think it's either the Leafs' top 2 centermen versus what Boston can ice, or like the Leafs forward group in general versus what Boston can ice, or the goaltending. But it sounds like you think the goaltending is the greatest discrepancy between these 2 teams.
Yeah, last night I was just looking through comparing the teams in all these different ways, and Boston, they're getting so much from having 2 goalies that played as well. Like it's like having 2 top 10 goalies in the league, And I know they had a hard time translating that in the playoffs last year, and that was part of what got them. It sounds like they're going to go full rotation in the playoffs, which is going to be. They did it almost all year. Like they went back and forth all year, other than I think there was like 3 games or something where they didn't do that. So it'd be pretty interesting to see a different guy every second game if that's the way that they go. I do think that's the difference because I don't see a big difference anywhere else.
Yeah, I do with the forward groups. I think that Toronto's forwards better, have a much, much, much bigger impact in this series. Like you look down
Boston's always like bigger than the sum of their parts, though, the way that they play. Like, you look on paper and it's like, they look thin at center, but then you play against them and it's like, it doesn't, they're just they're super well coached. They're really good defensively. They're in the right spots. Bergeron was obviously a beast, but they're a really smart team.
They are. I think that's another tip in the Boston side of the ledger, is that they're a much more well-coached team. Like they do not have as many breakdowns as the Toronto Maple Leafs have. Not throughout the course of this regular season. Like that is the thing. You're right. They are better than the sum of their parts. But when push comes to shove and this series ends up happening, that has to be the key for Toronto. I'm sorry. Like it can't be anything else. They can't be hoping Samsonov outplays one of these guys and that they can goalie the Boston Bruins. Like they've got to play with force and go, okay, sorry, what's your third line? Frederick, Geekie, Van Riemsdyk? Yeah, we're caving that in.
Not only that, but like other than Pastrnak, who really scares you, like you watch Brad Marchand this year, and he's finally slowing down and looking older, and like there's a big separation there between Pastrnak and everybody else. And then you look at the Leafs, and it's like, well, the Leafs have like three guys who can really should be able to dominate a game. So you're right. That does have to be a big separation.
It absolutely has to be. Like, what's the gap? I think Pastrnak has 110 points and Marchand has 67. Like, everyone made this huge deal about Kucherov this season in terms of his, Hart candidacy. Like, his team stinks, and so he's good, and that's why he should win, which is crazy. Like, the people who are voting for Kucherov are driving me insane. Like, I can barely get words out because it's so, don't do that. He's so clearly fourth out of this entire group of guys. But whatever.
I know lots of voters look at the point standings and he's going to get lots of easy votes with that. And a lot of people will have him second too as a result of that. It's going to be close.
I know. I think he has my understanding of it from shopping around and texting people is that he has it's going to be McKinnon, but if it isn't McKinnon, it's going to be Kucherov. And that's not what the betting odds reflected the last time I saw it. But that's lunatic behavior. Like every day, I love how, hold on, I'm just going one quick side tangent here. I love how the analytics community and every article I ever read on your site and every site now is like 5-on-5 numbers, 5-on-5 numbers. Like, that's all we ever look at, right? That's all we ever want to discuss. And then all of a sudden it comes down to this and people are like, well, secondary assists on the power play for Kucherov, you got to give it to him. And I'm like, okay, I guess so. We're getting smarter.
That's not analytics people saying that, though.
Okay, sure. What? I mean, you guys, who's going to be getting votes? I've looked through the who gets votes. It's a lot of people from your side. It's a lot of people from here. I'm just saying that it's like.
Well, we put out our trophy. We had McKinnon narrowly ahead of Matthews. It was 1-2, and then Kucherov got dinged big time for the defensive play stuff.
Yeah,
if
no
you look
kidding.
At our breakdown,
yeah, no kidding. It's like we get all smarter as hockey fans. We're all supposed to be way smarter. We're all supposed to be like getting all this added information. We can watch in a different way than we ever could before, right? Like, there's access to every single game all of the time, and we have all these numbers and all these and they're not perfect, but it's better than ever. And here we are going into the Hart Trophy candidacy and being like, man, Kucherov, do you see all his secondary power play assists? You got to give it to him.
This might shock you, but the voters for the Hart Trophy are the hockey writers, and they're not all analytics.
No. But I don't even think it's just like it's driving me nuts. Anyways, anyway, back to the thing. Do you believe in the psychology of the not getting 70 for Matthews impacting this team in a negative way? Because there is a part of me going, man, it was another thing that you guys set out to accomplish and you didn't. And they were unstructured. And Keefe had that quote about how these 4 games, he doesn't even know the scores. It was clear what they were doing. They were stat chasing. They were going for the 70. But ultimately, they didn't accomplish the goal over their final 4 games of the season, which, I don't know. I think it's fair to extrapolate at least a tiny bit of that into the energy that you're taking into or the momentum that you're taking into a series, no?
I don't know. Maybe a little tiny bit. I wonder, the momentum of just, not really playing a real game and, not playing anything that matters and losing those 4 games and just, they haven't looked good, right? So, I just wonder if some of that carries over. What's the last game you feel really good about how they played and they look like how you want them to in the playoffs and because that's been a problem in the past coming into the playoffs is the Leafs come in still playing like they have in the regular season. I remember 2018, 2019, those early games against Boston and the Leafs just looking like they were still kind of getting over that part of that end of the regular season that didn't mean anything, whereas Boston was ready to go right away. So I think I would worry about that a little bit more than I think Matthews is going to be ready to go. So is the rest of the team going to have a 69 goal hangover? I don't know, but I would worry a little bit that they haven't had to play for anything in quite a while, and they got to snap into the mindset of playing their best hockey right away on Saturday.
I'd buy that more if the team was a younger team, I'd buy that more if they had been chasing this when Matthews and Marner were 22, 23. Boston did the same thing. Boston didn't play their last couple of games of the season. And so, we're going to parse over when the last time, the last time the Leafs played good games was on the 8th and 9th.
Boston's always ready, though. Boston's always ready for the playoffs, and Toronto isn't. Totally. Yeah, although, the Bruins weren't exactly ready last year. But
that's what I'm saying is if we're looking at this just from a hey, this is the Toronto Maple Leafs, everything goes, they played 2 really quality games against Pittsburgh and against the Devils and back-to-back on the 8th and 9th. It's the 18th today. It's been 10 days since they played good hockey. It's going to end up being what's the math? 3 more days? 2 more nights? Yeah, 2 more nights. So, it's I don't think that's the biggest deal to me anyways. Maybe that's wrong. And I'm not saying I'm right, you're wrong. That to me has been more secondary because I've just seen enough times where these guys have snapped into shape, have snapped into form, and I think that is a part of who they are as a group, and they understand the stake. To me, the thing just remains that they clearly grip their sticks too tight in big moments, like they do. And to me, if you view this as a big moment, scoring 70 goals, which I do because they decided to punt the last 4 games of the season on this, and certainly the last 2, it's like they look like a team that was tight. They looked like a team that was chasing it in times. And yeah, I didn't really love that Keefe is like consoling Auston Matthews and that the guys on the team who scored goals are looking at Matthews sheepishly, even though Tavares was criminal. Like, I think he should be at least put in prison for 24 hours for the way that he acted on that power play with Matthews. But yeah, that part of it is like, man, when the moments get tight and the moments get tough, would have been nice to see you come through. That's all.
Yeah, when Matthews had like 20 shot attempts and like was ringing it off the bar, and I mean, it was mostly bad luck, right? Like,
sure. That's what. Hey, guess what? Hey, where have you heard that before?
Well,
every postseason. Oh, hey, Montreal, I got to stand. It's mostly bad luck. Hey, it's like that's what every Leaf fan that has supported the core 4 has said every single playoff exit is.
No way. Montreal, like game 6 and game 7, like it's just complete no-show. Like that. Like,
I know, but I'm just saying that it was
not bad luck if you only have 5 shots on goal in a game that matter.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, they broke by that point. I'm just saying that every year it's always, oh, well, Bobrovsky even last season. Look at how many shots they got. You could argue they outplayed them and they got goalied. And if they got their chances, it's bad luck.
There has been a lot of that. Korpisalo, like remember that?
Yes.
Korpisalo.
Bad luck. It's a lot of bad luck. Oh, this game is stupid. It mostly comes down to bad luck. I'm like, okay. Like, all right, whatever you say so. It's a lot of bad luck. It's conspiring.
Once you get to the 8th time, then...
That's what I mean. And this is another example of where it's like, oh, it's just bad luck. Okay, fine. I guess it was all bad luck. I'm trying. I'm doing my best here. Okay, so getting to the postseason. Matthews, yeah, you got to hope he's fine because, again, he's still got to drive the bus, still needs to score a bunch of goals. And I do think that the legacy of the season for me, like, I have my legacy rankings in terms of, like, who this means the most to. I actually have Matthews still 3rd. But, yeah, if he goes into this postseason, they get knocked out in 6 games. He only scores a goal or 2. I think that is going to put a pretty significant damper on the way that we remember the 69 goals and the way that the rest of the league does. Because it's like, this is Toronto, not Washington. Like, no one remembers Ovi's 65-goal season in terms of, like, what happened after. But people here will, So that it's a big one for him. He's definitely got to do it. But for you, who has the most at stake, personally? One person who has the most at stake going into this postseason. You can pick front office to, depth defenseman.
Well, I mean, Sheldon Keefe is like they have to do something.
That's
like,
what I have one as well.
I can't. He's fighting for his job here. Mm-hmm. Like this series is it. So because there's going to be changes if they go out in 5 or 6. I mean, I think if they lose in the first round, there's going to be changes. So and it feels like he would be the number 1. And then it would be back to the discussion about the core and. You got both Tavares and Marner with 1 year left on their deal. Mm-hmm. The DNA of your team and your cap picture and everything. So I would go number 1, Keefe, for sure, because everything's on the line for him. And then it's probably Marner and Matthews are right there next.
That's what I have. I have it as Keefe 1, Marner 2, Matthews 3, Nylander 4, Samsonov 5. My biggest question, though, to you is, did I improperly do this because Brendan Shanahan's name should be on that list higher?
Yeah, and he's another one. He's got 1 year left in his deal. Mm-hmm. He's got a new boss coming in. There's some things moving around with the ownership structure. Michael Grange had a great story about that a couple of weeks ago. If people didn't see it, just about everything that's going on. So you got a new boss, and I know for a fact ownership is very frustrated with how bad the Leafs have been in the playoffs. And I mean, if you got 2 media companies, that rely on ratings and interest, and part of the calculation, I think, when they bought the national TV package was, hey, the Leafs are going to be in the playoffs and they're going to, those are the games everyone's watching. Like, can you imagine the viewership of the Leafs going on a run to the, 3rd and 4th round? And like, it would just be unbelievable.
James, I can't imagine it because I imagine it every year. That's the most hilarious thing about doing this job is like tying the thing that I wish I could, if there's one thing I could do to go back to younger me, who was getting into this industry, I would say, hey, you know how that team that has like shattered your hopes and dreams your entire existence? And I would go, yeah. It's like, you want to talk about them, right? Because it's fun. And you'd be like, oh, definitely. Like, that's a dream of mine. And they go, but how would you feel about being tied financially to their successes? And I would be like, oh, well, that wouldn't be very wise. I'd be like, yeah, exactly. Now, maybe go to law school. that's maybe just, follow through on your plan. And you're not too big to go to the University of Manitoba. You just go, do it. Anyways, I agree with you. I just wonder if he would get the opportunity, if it's a first round exit, to be the guy that has to make those heavy decisions.
I suspect there'll be a one more year kind of situation there, but I think everything's going to be I think the ownership group, there's a lot of people there who feel the way the fans do, who are just kind of fed up with this, and they want to see something substantial shift. Yep. They just can't. They're tired of Groundhog Day. So the Leafs need to show that they're not the same team, but it's a huge series. I'm glad it's Boston. This makes sense. Like, this is like, they've been through, they've played them 3 times, and it just means more than if you beat Florida. It will.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what I really like about it too, now that we're talking it through, is Boston is not as good. Like, it's conclusive from a full regular season of who they are and just, some of the names on the back of the jerseys at this point, right? Like, you've gone from Patrice. It's one thing if Patrice Bergeron shuts you down. You get shut down by Pavel Zacha, it's not going to be as easy to swallow. And I think if you're a Leaf fan, the one thing that you can kind of take solace in, or even if you're this front office and trying to make these decisions, is like, they've been paralyzed by breaking up the core 4, right? It's, oh my God, the idea that you trade Mitch Marner for pieces and it's not the sum of the whole, and he goes on to be great in Anaheim or what, like who? And the history of this market in terms of chasing players and guys not want to be, it's too hard, blah, blah, blah. They go and have successes other places. You can't make a good Marner trade. You can't make a good Marner trade. Oh, you got to just keep doubling down and doing the same thing over and over again. You lose to this Boston team, and it looks like part of it is just the inability of the core 4 to push through, play these tough games, overcome the challenges that are going to be in front of them mentally. Then it's like, these guys weren't juggernauts. You were just as good as them. They outplayed you. They had the intangibles, and you actually do have to work on the intangibles at this point. It isn't just a skill league.
Yeah, and I think Boston's a great example of an intangibles team. Like, they play like a great team and a great system, and you can see it when they have injuries. Like, you take McAvoy out for 2 weeks, and it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, they plug in different guys, and like, who would have everyone, all the dire predictions when Bergeron retired, Pavel Zacha is going to be your first line center, and the Bruins are going to drop 20 points in the standings, and it didn't really happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a testament to coaching staff. It's a testament to it's a smart team. They have a lot of smart players over there. And I think one of the challenges for the Leafs is they're not really a smart team. Like, they make a lot of mistakes, and, the goaltending's been kind of all over the place. So they just got to hope that they're not making mistakes that are going to kill them against a team that's going to be waiting to capitalize on those mistakes.
Mm-hmm. So the guy that I have number 4 in the rankings in terms of stakes is William Nylander. His are lower because he just got paid. He's not going anywhere because he put in a no move. But yeah, he had 11 games with no goals and 4 assists and -3. And Sheldon Keefe said yesterday that he wasn't. What was the quote, Mike? He said something like, he seems pretty clear he was done playing regular season hockey. I think that they put it in my doc. I don't want to misquote it because that gets everybody all riled up and pissed off, and nobody likes that stuff. But yeah, he basically insinuated that, he's over it. He's just, there it is. I think in the last week, Willie's sort of shown that he's done with regular season hockey. He's ready to move along, but I'm not concerned about Willie, end quote. Okay, so I think a lot of us are giving him the benefit of the doubt because he has shown up in the playoffs. There's a 2-part question. One is, are you keeping him on a line by himself? And yes, it's better talent, but as the guy who's supposed to drive the line definitively, a third-line player, or are you putting him back with, more, dominant players regularly? Like, you're not screwing around with that. You put him in with Marner and Tavares and saying, nope, this is a loaded line. And yeah, if he, does fall apart here, the reason why I think that the stakes are big for him is he goes back to being one of the most polarizing players in Leafs history because everyone's going to have the exact same narrative of you got paid and you changed. And then his defenders are going to remain, steadfast because they always do.
I got to be honest, I'm a little bit worried about him. And I'm a bit worried about him down on that third line because it's been such a tough, 11 games, 15 games? I think he's got one goal and 5 points and 15 or something to end the year. Like he just hasn't been anything close to what he was the rest of the season. And it wasn't just like a 3 or a 4 game thing. It was basically a whole month. So, and you read the quotes coming from Nylander. I know we had a story on him a couple of days ago, and it's like, oh boy, this seems like a guy who's kind of in his own head a little bit. And he really wanted the 100 points. It looked like it was going to be a given for most of the year, and then he didn't get it. And I think that, you're playing with Holmberg. You're not getting the opportunities that maybe you did earlier in the year, and you've got this drought. I could see it start to snowball on him a little bit. I think I would start the playoffs that way, but if you need a goal, you got to move him up the lineup. And Keefe's done a pretty good job of, in this configuration, making sure Nylander still gets his 19, 20 minutes a game by mixing and matching the lines. So I think you start this way, you win game one and it looks good, then you stick with it. But they're not going to be able to win this series if Nylander's the Nylander he's been for the last, month of the season.
I actually have him as my most important X factor. Like, it's weird to call him an X factor, but it's the way I look at it is if he can dominate those third line minutes, that looks to me like one of the biggest advantages that Toronto has. And yes, he will 100%. Keefe is 100% going to mishmash these things. I watched Elliott on the panel the other day, and he was asked a question, and he basically answered it with, it doesn't matter because all these guys are going to play together and they're going to have a bunch of different looks. And you go, yep, I actually agree with that, but no more so than Nylander playing third line minutes to start, but them constantly and consistently putting him with Tavares and Marner on a second line and trying to get more offense from him. The thing that worries me, though, is that is the only times that you really did see him. And the other part of it is, and I don't think anybody said this, because I read that piece too. I think it was Jonas's piece, right, where he interviewed Nylander 101. It was a good piece. Nylander's, the entire premise of him is that he is unbothered by the market and he is unbothered by pressure and he is Mr. Cool. And then here he is in an article going, and I'm not criticizing him for being honest, it's fine, or whatever the way you want to spin it, but here he is in an article going, I think that, the chase for 100 and the contract, that these are weighing on me mentally. And I went, oh yeah, now I'm reminded that Mitch Marner the year after his contract was the worst version of himself, right? That this tends to have an effect on players is you get that contract and it has, an impact on what you're doing mentally. And for a guy like Nylander, who was having his career season, who was doing all these amazing things, now he's stepping into a playoff series with the guy I view as his big brother, David Pastrnak. And it's like, what's Pasta going to do in this series? You know what my guess is? A lot. You know what a safe prediction is that the Leaf killer is going to kill the Leafs on a few occasions. Can he look like a semblance of the player that he got paid more money than? And I think it's going to be very important for him.
Yeah, well, I mean, Nylander came into the season with a huge chip on his shoulder, and there was all the talk about the contract and what is he worth, and then he was tied for third in NHL scoring, 3 months into the year, and the Leafs felt like they had to pay him. So it's and to your point, you're right. Like, Nylander normally is the guy where the market and the pressure doesn't bother him. That's why when I saw some of the quotes and you see the way he's playing, it's like, what's going on here? Like, this is not like him. So the question is there gonna be a switch that's flipped and he's ready to go for game one, or is some of this going to hang around him? Because they need him to be good. Tavares was a 65-point player this year. Well, I guess you don't know what you're going to get from Matthews and Marner in the playoffs, but you at least know that those are your weapons. But if you can have a third one in Nylander, Boston can't match that, especially if they're on different lines.
I actually have no idea what I'm going to get from Marner in the playoffs. Like, what's your Marner opinion since he came back from the injury? Like, to me, he's played largely purposeless hockey.
Yeah, he's had a weird season. He's had a really slow start, and then really, really good for a stretch. I don't know. He's been kind of all over the place, right? So he's played better with Matthews. He's just much more noticeable there. But spreading the wealth makes more sense to me, especially against a team like Boston.
I don't feel better about this now. I was like,
it's going to be close, man. It's going to be a 7-game series.
Yeah.
It's going to come down to, can the Leafs hold on to some leads? Can they
Game 7 in
box?
TD Garden, great. Like, it's great.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been to all the I've been there 2013, 18, 19. You walk into that building for a Game 7, and it's like, I'm intimidated. I'm just here to like write a story on my laptop, and it's like it's an atmosphere. It's like, I've been to Cup Finals and I've been to the Olympics, and like that, those games are amazing, amazing atmosphere.
This is honestly
credit to the fan base, but it intimidates the players for sure.
Yeah, Yeah, I refuse to have anybody ever say anything otherwise. No, a lot of what I love about this job is that you get to talk things out, you get to talk things through. And yeah, where I'm landing on this is I started the segment basically trying to figure out why some of the fans are a little apathetic this year and why some of the fans, it just doesn't feel as exciting despite Matthews. And why I think the 70 was important is like the fan base being like, yes, this happened. Like, what an awesome thing. Like, roll it in the playoffs. They're cruising. They got the different guys. And then Domi got hurt. And then, the rest of the lineup had some injuries to it. And Matthews sits on 69 and Nylander doesn't crack 100 points. And it's like, you didn't carry the swagger through that you really wanted to. And I think that's happened with the fans as well. And like when we're painting these pictures about the postseason, it's like, it's way too familiar for people. And everyone's like, maybe just give me a round. Give me a round to get excited for. Like it used to be, all right, now it's time for the stakes because the first round was the everything. And now it's kind of like, damn, they might really go back to losing in the first round and it could end up being very familiar, like overly familiar. And you got to be guarded against that. The same way like Blue Jays fans are guarded coming into the season, seeing this offense and seeing their manager make the decisions that he makes and the offense just sputter at times and fail to cash runners in scoring position is the same that I think a lot of Leaf fans are feeling going into this postseason. Where like you just can't separate the years prior. You can't separate the teams prior.
No, I mean there's a huge portion of the fan base that doesn't believe in this team. Yeah. So, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
I mean they've seen them fail so many times. They're going to have to win them over the course of these games and these series. And I think they're going to have to. I think to really change hearts and minds, you got to be beat Boston and then play better in the second round than they did last year.
Hearts and minds. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, last one. What's your blue line configuration to start game 1?
I don't know.
I know this is the poor but just do your best. Do your best. I think
Lyubushkin's playing the worst out of the top 7 that they've got. Okay. I would think about sitting Lyubushkin. I like Benoit McCabe. I want Edmondson playing. I would play Brody.
So you're playing Brody with Nylander, or with Riley then.
That'd be interesting.
No. Yeah, you're playing him with Riley then. Sorry, I have the two guys written in my notes of like the two coldest guys, Riley and Nylander, and so I just flipped them because to me they're like the same guy.
I mean, you don't have to play Brody with Riley. Although you
play Riley with Liljegren against the Bruins, the Boston Bruins.
Maybe you do have to go with Lyubushkin in and just hope that he's not throwing grenades to the other team. Like maybe, I don't know. Yeah. So I guess what they probably do, and I understand why they would do it, would be Riley, Lyubushkin, Benoit McCabe, and you get your veteran guys on the third pair in Brody and Edmondson. Feels weird not to have Liljegren in there, but he's missed a lot of time. So
I have Liljegren in there. I have it as this. Benoit McCabe, Lyubushkin, Riley, Edmondson, Liljegren. And I'm leaving Brody out for this reason. I get it if you're Sheldon Keefe, you're going, man, he's a vet and he's important in the room and everybody loves him. And, he's been steady. He's been a soldier. Some of the stuff probably is a little overstated. But you know who I feel the most nervous about when it comes to trying to get pucks out of their own end? Like who I'm most nervous about when it comes to the other team's forecheck? It's the guy that plays on his offhand and has bobbled more pucks than anybody this season. Like it's that part of the game. If you're afraid of the Bruins' ability to score, it's that they're going to do the same thing. Hard forecheck, turnovers, create opportunities, and use their physicality and size. Who do you get images of when you're like, oh, he's going in the corner, he's got to play a puck. Oh, there he is on his offside, and he turned it over. Now the puck's out in the slot, bang, in the back of the net over Samsonov's shoulder. It's Brody.
I mean, that could be 3 or 4 guys on the
Yes,
Leafs
I
line
agree.
right now.
I totally agree. They're a grenade launching team, like the one Lyubushkin had against the Pittsburgh Penguins comes to mind, right? Where you're like, holy crap, dude, what does he see? But also, or like Giordano. What game was that where he's turning around the net and he just whips one right in the middle of the ice, like literally tape to tape into the slot? No, they've got guys who turn the puck over. But you know what I'm saying? When it comes to the physical play in the corners, the guy who seems to have the toughest time is Ben Brody to me. And so I think he's game one scratch. Like that's the best I think you can start with. And then if any of those guys has a bad game, essentially, because nobody's safe outside of, to me, Benoit, McCabe, Riley, Edmondson, then basically Lyubushkin or Liljegren, one of you two has a bad game, cool, you're out, Brody's in.
Yeah, I think that I go Brody over Liljegren, I think, just because I think down the lineup, and maybe you play Brody on the left side, and it's really tough, though. I think probably like the forwards with the defense, we're going to see a bunch of different pairings mashed together, and it's going to be fluid, and it's going to be changing. And it's funny that the one thing that everyone agrees on is Benoit McCabe, which, I mean, good for Benoit. I mean, what a year that he's had. You know, who would have thought that would be the one pairing you could count on all season? But I don't know who you put against Pastrnak and you feel good about on this team.
You don't know?
Well, I mean, those two, I guess.
No, I know. No one. Duh.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? There's no answer to that of, oh, that's what you feel good. It's like it's a nightmare every single time he's on the ice, obviously.
See, it should be like that for the other team. See, Bruins fans should be feeling like that in a playoff series with any of Matthews or Nylander or Marner out there. That's what they need to make happen.
Yeah. Yeah. This is why it's incredibly important for Matthews to establish this. Like, this is my other part of it is, you're in the conversation with all these guys in the Hart, right? But every one of them that is in this conversation has won, right? Kucherov's won. McKinnon has won. Crosby has won. You're there with these winners. And McDavid is a separate entity, which is, if you don't think McDavid is conclusively and by a significant margin the best player in the NHL, like, I think you're trying too hard. You're pressing here. It's very clear who's the best guy in hockey. If they were just doing the best player award, it would be him every single year, and we wouldn't even need to he'd have to play like NBA style 65 games to qualify for this thing. If Matthews really wants to be in that company, he's got to start feeling that way in the postseason. He doesn't need to win the Stanley Cup this year, but he's got to feel that way in the playoffs where the other team is just living in fear of him and he's just coming out and scoring big goals. And that's the big legacy shifter for him, in my opinion.
He should be deciding games.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
Scare
69 goals. I mean, 7-game playoff series, you should have 6 goals.
Yeah.
Like that's like the bar that you've set.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's enough for today. I'll be talking to you all playoffs, obviously. James, thanks for making time, buddy.
Yeah. Thanks, JD.
See you, pal. James Mirtle, Senior Managing Editor at The Athletic.